The story from RedMonk's perspective is always for us that we are interested in enterprises that understand the need for developer velocity and that are investing accordingly. So they think about the developer experience. They think about that from a social perspective. They think about that from a platform perspective. And yeah, so quite frankly, that's, when I heard the Duke Energy story, I was excited because that's exactly the kind of folks that we're interested in. RedMonk is all about developer-led tech adoption, and obviously, where the bottom up meets the top down, that's where business value lies. So in terms of velocity, and I understand that you've got a really powerful story in that regard because you've had to be moving probably more quickly than you have historically. That was something that I thought we could talk about both from a developer perspective, but also from a business perspective.
So Richard Donaldson, I have accountability for our digital practice at Duke Energy, which kind of grew out of, I don't know, Ellie, is there 5 of us 5 years ago and is now about 450 folks. We kind of had the whole gambit of, if you think about a product team, covered everything from software engineers to data scientists to UX, design thinking, product owners, product managers, et cetera, et cetera. And when you've got just pertinent to this audience, we've got a pretty big platform team, 35 plus people who really just make sure that the developers are moving quickly and have everything they need so that they're not wasting time getting code from environment to environment or on scans, and pretty robust tool set there, as well as, those are engineers, doing work for other engineers.
Definitely a solid platform team. How many developers are they supporting?
Well, so I said 450 people, maybe half of that is engineers, a little more than half. Probably the thing I'm most excited about is while we're about 450 people, we probably have around 3,000 workers in our information technology department proper. And so we've got a ways to go. It took us 5 years to get here. Now we've got to go take what we built and really kind of indoctrinate the rest of the organization in this new way of thinking. And that'll kind of bleed into what I've seen, really pleased with is, I grew up supporting COTS systems, filling out a form to get some servers racked and stacked, and then filling out another form to get someone to lay down, IIS or something that's needed, and another form to get the database installed, and then another form to get access, and, long, lengthy outages when we had to do an upgrade. And I think just, and I was never a coder, by the way, but, watching these developers basically have everything at their fingertips that they need to be successful. And seeing things like, we blow away our cloud platform and it rebuilds itself with no downtime, and watching the velocity of the teams with how quickly they can release features to our business partners who, our business partners are accustomed to, completing a 30-page document and all the requirements in 3 years, and 2x the budget later, they get something that they can almost recognize as what they asked for, but not enough to make them satisfied. So those are some of the things that I think are indicators that we're doing it the right way.
I think historically, sort of from the developer perspective, IT was something that was sort of done to them. You will do this. I think these days, maybe there's a bit more of a listening posture. How do you, look at the estate in terms of people and how you can make them more productive in terms of the environments they would prefer and perhaps actively choose? I think one of the things we've seen in some teams that are coming at this from a product and platform perspective is to spend a bit more time asking the developers the kinds of technologies they would prefer. Whereas historically it was sort of very top down. You're going to use Java, you're going to use this database and so on. So that might not be how it works with you, but I was just interested in any changes in terms of the influence of developers on the choices that you as an organization and an enterprise make.
We're a big company, so it's important for us to have standards. We have a modern architecture framework that we live by. So the thought being, and not always, but the thought being is a developer could move from one team to another and be fairly proficient, only needing to pick up kind of the business side of the equation, because we're prescribing to not only our standard languages and tool sets, but also a standard way of developing code. And I would say I will contrast that with, having worked with COTS systems, it was not easy to get someone that was working on PeopleSoft to go support SAP or to go support Maximo. That was a huge uplift because different architectures, different frameworks. And so, when we advertise the benefits of building in-house, one of the benefits is flexibility across the engineers, as well as the total cost of ownership tends to be much, much lower for a number of reasons. So I mentioned the business part, and that's one I'd love to talk about real quick is, we started this journey in 2015 with this just kind of obsessive love for making the customer happy, meaning the Duke Energy customer. And so, what I saw very early from these developers was not just that they were technically savvy, but within 3 months, it would almost appear as if they were a call center agent or had 10 years in the field driving around with our distribution crews servicing outages. And so where that really popped its head up is if you look at a lot of our products that we're proud of, they're things that our customers put their hands on. So I don't know if any of you are Duke Energy customers, but we have a mobile app that our customer can access. They can get an outage map to see, outages in their area. We focus intently on, it's always the painful transactions that you want to focus on. And certainly bill pay is at the top of the list. Outage restoration was another one that we started early. And that even gets into how we think about applying innovation to our business partners. So we've got an XR lab that we're really proud of that we use to just recently develop some training modules in. So instead of having 300 service techs drive back to a central location and spend a tenth of the time eating coffee and donuts, and then the other 90% maybe absorbing some training, we built virtual reality worlds where you can go in and get that training experience. And we're all technologists. We know that the stickiness of immersive training versus instructor led is probably tenfold.
For sure. That said, I do think that coffee and donuts are quite important. So, we shouldn't forget that part of the equation. But I think that example you give, must be even more pressing in 2020. It's certainly not been a good year for classroom training. So was that something new that was a response, or were you already on that track?
Yeah, we were already on that track. Build the capability and the muscle, but along the way, try to find some valuable use cases to the enterprise. We're not a startup, so we don't have venture capital just oozing out our ears. So we've got to really make sure that if we think highly of a blockchain is a good example. We spent about a year on blockchain, had a couple use cases, but couldn't get an executive to stand up to the value proposition. And so we shut it down. We just can't afford to experiment when there's not value to be had.
I think it's such an advantage. I think that's one of the things that we saw, for example, in retail. Everyone was like, oh, Amazon's competing with us now. But frankly, the companies that had responded and invested accordingly were just best placed this year to be able, I think for me, the big example is like curbside pickup. For those organizations that perhaps to your point were all about commercial, or off the shelf software, we're not in a good place to respond. And so, I think the companies that were already undergoing their digital transformation journey have had a bit of an advantage there. Talking of digital transformation, so I'm obviously there are some branding changes associated with Pivotal and the Pivotal journey, but I'm quite interested. I think that one of the real strengths of Pivotal and obviously Pivotal Labs is that transformation of the customer and how they develop software. I'd love to hear a bit about sort of whether you've been on that journey and that's been part of the transition you made and some of the advantages you see there and how that ties into your platform choices.
We took more than just a platform from Pivotal. We really took a page out of their book to learn who we want to be when we grow up. So, the labs approach is something that we had people go down and learn the methodology used there, and much of it was incorporated. In fact, much of the lab sites became kind of blueprints for the things we wanted to put in our innovation center when we built that. I think the thing we've enjoyed through that is, a lot of time there are a lot of companies out there that can help you on your digital journey, or there's a lot of companies out there who will tell you they can help you.
They will claim they can help you make the change. That's a big, big difference.
Yeah, but that's not their objective. Their objective is to, build revenues, right? Yep. So I think the model of Pivotal that was attractive to us was, kind of getting in, getting out, teaching, and only engaging if they think you have a high chance of success. Because at the end, really what Pivotal's trying to do is build, they want additional containers, whatever you call it. It's the unit. Pivotal success is usage of the platform. And if you can't successfully learn to develop code and write and serve your business and use the modern patterns, then you're not going to be, you're going to shrink up and you'll be back to buying large software packages. So that was, I think, an intriguing differentiator from our perspective.
Yeah, I love your story about reshoring. I think, or at least the idea of building your developer muscle. We've seen, successful companies in the digital economy. That's the approach they've taken. So much of the whether it was commercial off the shelf or just, frankly, outsourcing with waterfall models and, kind of something coming back after 2 years. It's like the business problem has changed. I think there's been a substantial change. So one thing that I'm particularly interested in that regard, you mentioned the cloud journey. Could you say a little bit about that? I mean, obviously, I think one of the big questions we have is about like hybrid cloud. To what extent do you feel you need to be all in on the public cloud, or as a regulated industry and, energy and, as a utility, where uptime is so important, perhaps you have different considerations. I'd love to know from both the business and the development perspective, how you see the journey to cloud going over the next couple of years.
I mean, you hit on an interesting point because, we want to aggressively get to the cloud, but because we're a regulated utility and the grid is such a critical asset for the nation's infrastructure, I think that we will always have, not for uptime, but more for just security and regulatory reasons, we'll always have some things in our data center. Because basically, that's not to say we can secure it better than the cloud providers, but we can throw more muscle at it for the things that absolutely need that kind of protection. And we are very good at that. We have a tremendous cybersecurity organization, and the group that runs our in-house infrastructure is tremendous. I think what we would like to do is get very quickly to, some of our business facing applications and customer facing applications for sure, is get to where they're either, stuff we built using cloud native techniques that are running up in the public cloud, stuff that we've refactored so that we can move it up to the cloud and take advantage of what the cloud has to offer, right? Because lift and shift to the cloud doesn't necessarily get you the benefit, but at the same time, there's a cost of running stuff on your internal infrastructure that may not be worth it if you can just port it up to the cloud. I mean, you almost can look at it as a data center migration. And then there's this other avenue of, there are more pieces of software that we would rather buy than build, because, there's just so many commodity offerings out there that you'd want to take advantage of. Is how do we get to where, by and large, we're renting those? It's software as a service and not buying, installing, maintaining, because that gets costly. The total cost of ownership for something that you buy and install internally is probably less than what it would be if you could just do software as a service. It's some kind of
the transition in the industry to managed services just makes so much sense from the perspective of, making the developers more productive. It was like the old days of open source. Open source may have been free, but it was free like a puppy, right? Needed a lot of care and feeding and watering and attention. And I think that transition to managed services, certainly from an operator perspective, but very much the developer experience perspective, I think that's exactly right. We're moving to higher levels of abstraction. Thank you very much, and yeah, definitely look forward. Well, we'll be talking again soon enough.